Barrie Mayor Alex Nuttall pitching to use federal community safety grant to provide summer camps for at-risk kids, especially those who live in government housing. During the last week's General Committee meeting at Barrie City Hall, the Council discussed how to best allocate more than $1 million the city receives for addressing guns and gangs issues in Barrie.
That we are thinking that young people are going to be in difficult situations. Like let's think about the summertime, right? Those with means, most of their kids are going into camps, right? I always tell people that the local park is the summer camp for the kids in government housing. I think that we had some missed opportunities to be able to provide free camps, free access to at-risk children and youth in our community. With this funding, I feel that we were actually as a city best positioned, but we had a little bit of a conflict of interest inside of our own team that made the decisions on where the money should go and how it should be spent.
Due to the substantial federal grants, it cost the city only $4,000 per student to run these programs during the summer break. During the meeting, the Council also discussed the composition of the Recreation and Sport Community Grant Panel. This grant offers financial support to local organizations and initiatives that promote the recreational and sports activity within the community. The Council agreed that the panel would consist of 3 staff members and 2 community members. Please find the timestamp to jump to the relevant section of the meeting.
We're going to now move on to Councillor Kungle with REC 001-24 Recreational Sport Community Grant Adjudication Process. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I want to may I put the motion on the floor as presented, but I'm going to speak to it and then I may have an amendment. I really love that we've got dedicated grants. I understand the interest in changing some of the composition, but I guess my concerns are I see this as an opportunity for us to really look at how we can be hands-in on the framework, the criteria, the policy, the final approval, but that the panel is citizen-led, that it's citizens being not elected officials. And one piece in particular is I'd really love to see, because I think the next motion talks about another type of composition, a view of all the different grant monies. How could we potentially look at that from a pooling? Because I still firmly believe, and we've heard even earlier tonight, Shaq's World coming together for funding. Some organizations just don't seem to fit in some categories or criteria. So while the motion is focused on a change of composition of the panel, I would really love to either add a section that directs staff to look at one that's operating in Guelph, and I'll talk a little bit about what I see as the merits of that. I want to share that context because I really struggle with supporting a movement to council members becoming the committee. And I think if that does happen, at least that's an interim measure, because I know the context of that conversation and wanting to happen soon is so that the next intake process has the committee in place. But for 2025, and whether this is a movement towards Mayor's Task Force or coming back to finance and governance, my intention is to ask Council to consider looking at Guelph. So City of Guelph actually last year I think gave $365,000 with some other considerations, and in particular have very clear alignment to strategic directions, KPIs, and other components. They also have a very interesting policy. I'm not sure if we do tie to this, but also an evaluation. And so while we get a report to say who got this, who applied and who received it, I think there's a whole different reporting structure. So I'd almost love a fulsome review to say, how do we actually explore the merits of what Guelph is doing? I believe that is a citizen panel, but through the criteria, I would say, let's set the criteria, let's be hands in on those pieces, hands out when it comes to identifying recommendations for who receives the funding. In their process, the decisions are made by their respective Deputy CAO of Public Services based on recommendations. Council still does the budget approval, Finance Department, has its role in that. But I also like to think that there are some pieces that also have, financial control from a sound audit when we're giving this kind of money out. I believe that does happen here. But I would really love to see consideration of really looking at overall an evaluation of how they're running. I think it's great that we're still committed to this. But in particular, we know people are still trying to find their way to councils to pitch us for funding. That whether we believe there's other revenue options, there are still groups that feel like there are gaps in being seen as part of the criteria. We have had many that I'm aware of receive significant capital dollars, which is great, but where does that come at a cost for other programs for startup? There are multi-year funding opportunities in that program. So for me, I think there's just naturally, maybe it's time to do a broader scope of, do we just pull all of our grant funding together and we look at the merits of this? So if council's proceeding for a structure, I would just say, I really hesitate to support it. I'm not aligned to replacing staff with council, and that just ending there. So I want to preface it to say, if that happens, I don't want that to come in place of us actually taking a fuller review and starting with Guelph and looking at perhaps staff coming back and proposing a structure to us to say, here's another way in which we could look at resident engagement with us taking more of a hands-off administrative approach as members of council. Happy to elaborate further, but struggle to support it as is.
And the other grants that you're saying to bring in are?
I think it would be nice to even, so I don't want to throw necessarily an amendment on the table here, because it would be nice to ask staff to say, what are all the other pools of grants that we have? Because I think we've got arts, we've got the sport and rec, there's other committees I think that have some discretion on dollars. But what would it look like if we just pooled all of our grants together and opened up the criteria? Because we know some concerns, I would even love the feedback. Individuals that have asked for grant funding, I don't believe are eligible if they ask for any staff support or administrative support, yet we're doing heavy capital. But some of our grassroots organizations just can't do it because they're volunteer run. So where do we maybe have an opportunity to even evaluate, where are we putting barriers on individuals doing really great work because of how we see them being able to handle the dollars?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rittman, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do see merit in that suggestion in terms of looking at the bigger picture. But just focusing on this recommendation and the next one, I'm reluctant to support them simply because I think that as council, our job is to steer the boat and not row the boat. And I think that this is getting into rowing, and I really am reluctant to get involved in the administrative part of a policy. It's up to us to set the policy, but not to implement the policy, and this is very much implementing. Now, if we believe that implementation is not being done well, or needs to be reinforced, then I think, fine, give us some suggestions. If we need some program or topic expert to evaluate these grant applications, I'm quite happy to add that into the adjudication mix. But I certainly don't think that I'm an expert in those areas, and I think we have staff on board already that know a lot about what the community needs and what the individual organizations need and how to evaluate them. So I'm very reluctant to get involved in that, and I don't think we should do it.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just looking at the current composition also, I struggle with a couple of the positions to really understand the rationale as to why they would be there. like I see there's a representative from the finance department. Well, someone from the finance department I wouldn't suspect is going to be, obviously from the finance be well-versed, but not from the sport and cultural side of it. And then also too, like, I fully understand why the Director of Recreation and Culture Services is there, but really struggle to understand why the GM of Community and Corporate Services would need to be there from an EMT level. So I guess first I'll put it to Mr. Miller as to why someone from finance would be well suited to be there, and then I guess I'll move the other one over to the CAO for that. But I just struggle with those two positions. I just think we're double tapping in the one end, and then I'm not so sure how finance really fits into this, other than obviously we're giving money away.
So through you, Mayor Nuttall, I'll just say that we in the finance department are very athletic and culture diverse folks. I think the intent was more on the, and I'll even let Dan maybe jump in as to why finance. I think it was more on the managing of the monies, the cash available, is it counted, that sort of thing. But I'll let Dan explain that one.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. In fact, the last adjudication panel had a representative from Development Services and Parks Planning in lieu of finance to support the adjudication of the grant funding.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that, and I'll take it offline, but I think even some of the composition we could potentially revisit. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this?
I guess it would just be that while we're motioning on this, if there's any opinions or views about a broader evaluation, so regardless of, you know, what's I think being told is just a full wipe and replacement, is then an appetite to actually look at how do we review the program overall, criteria, access, reporting, even with a new composition. So I think there's elements just in as we're giving out money, when was the last time that's been reviewed, and even if it comes to a new group, that's somewhere in kind of the process step.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Corser, go ahead.
I really like the sound of Councillor Kungol's motion. It kind of trumps a lot of things I was going to ask. But I would like to ask regarding the makeup of the adjudication committee. Going through the report, I've seen it mentioned multiple times that the arm's length of this committee, the adjudication committee, and it refers to the knowledge and expertise, the group making the decisions. So in these meetings, can you give me an example? I know this is kind of throwing it out there, but could you give me an example of maybe an imaginary procurement grant that you might submit that maybe would be inside knowledge of, like, maybe sports fields, or something that would not be top of mind of council that would have the information to be able to just be able to make those decisions? Maybe I won't be asking that because that's a tough one on the spot. I apologize. But I could see throughout the report, it states that using the knowledge and expertise the adjudication committee has, identifying funding priorities and determine the allocation of the funds. And it's been mentioned, like I said, several times about the knowledge and expertise of the makeup of the adjudication committee, and also the arm's length of it to make sure it's a fair and equitable process. I'm not in favor of having this completely replaced by elected officials, because I'm concerned about the greasy wheel gets the loud wheel gets the grease, and maybe some priorities might be misconstrued because we don't know all the insights and complexities of the different departments and the ongoing relationships with the city and the intricacies of it all, that maybe the knowledge and expertise that staff have and other members of the community have that they can bring to the table in this and the history that's involved. I wanted to ask, what brought this forward? How was this, what sparked this report? I guess I'd be asking it through you.
Mr. CEO.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, I think this program and the other program have been returned to General Committee to get additional direction. I've lost the name of the other program, the Brightening Barrie program, I apologize, and both the sports recreation program, which has certainly been around longer, but still only a couple of years. What staff have noticed over the last couple of years is invariably we don't have enough funding in the envelope. We end up with community groups that are, disappointed, either because they didn't get enough money, or perhaps they got no money because they didn't qualify. Oftentimes their recourse is to contact elected officials and plead their case. Elected officials then feel compelled to, if not intervene, to inquire. And you are immediately breaking the arm's length process. So staff are finding that is creating an inherent conflict. So the suggestion was that we would return these two programs to council and allow council to provide us with additional direction, either status quo, a new format, a different program, or alternative program. So that really is the genesis of it.
And if I may follow up on that, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Mr. Prowse, judgment call, I guess. You're a wise man. Do you feel that if this committee was made up of third-party citizens or outside of the actual staff and council, would that, do you feel, alleviate the backlash, if you will? If it's being out of both of our kind of both of our decision making, would that third-party disconnection, would that make? Do you feel that might mitigate some of the backlash that is being felt by, or the angst of some of these people that do not get the funding that come back and follow up?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, just for clarity, backlash, I think, is your term, not mine.
I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I apologize.
I would, as I try to do, I would advise council that, this is not a unique situation. Council just passed $5,000 for a small cultural group that falls outside whatever umbrella exists today. There's always going to be more needs than there are resources. The cultural grant program, which has been around many, many years now, is third-party adjudicators who specialize in the field, would be considered experts, are compensated for their time, and we still get inquiries, I'll call them inquiries, about those awards. Are they fair? How were they determined? That type of thing is inherent, I think, when local government is distributing funds. So the reality is I'm not sure it's going to solve any of those concerns for people who feel they've fallen outside of the program. I think staff's thought was that if there is concern about how staff are adjudicating the program, then the appropriate default would probably be the elected officials. Now, if the elected officials decide on something else, then that certainly is within your purview.
Okay, thank you for that. A lot to chew over. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Given the conversation back and forth here, I do have an amendment. I don't have it written down, so I will speak slowly to give the clerk time. So to replace paragraph 1, so still that the composition of the adjudication panel for the Recreation and Sport Community Grant be amended to replace the current adjudication panel composition with the Director of Recreation and Culture Services, a representative from the Economic and Creative Development, a representative from Tourism Barrie, and no more than 2 members of council. And to delete paragraph 2. And I can speak to that if needed, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think it's important that if there is a flavor around the table to want to have some council representation, I'm fine with that, but I think we have to make sure that we still have the key pieces and the key professionals in place to be able to provide the appropriate advice around the table when the decisions are being made. And those are the 3 key that I see out of the 5 that were from the previous panel, and I don't think it's wise to really make the panel much larger than 5. So that's my rationale.
Councillor Riepma?
Mr. Mayor, and I understand what Councillor Harvey is trying to do, but I don't think it's the right thing to do to mix councillors with staff and give each of them a voting right. I think it sets up a dynamic that is unhealthy and unwise. So I can't support that. I'm certainly open to other suggestions in terms of who might be on that committee, but it certainly shouldn't be a mix of staff and councillors.
Yeah, thank you. Just in response to Councillor Riepma, I appreciate what he's saying, but the reality of it is staff still outnumber the number of councillors. So those 2 councillors are not going to have enough sway to be able to move the needle on any of the applications coming in. And the other 3 that are at the table still outnumber them. So council doesn't have the pull at the table still, and that's why I specifically had it to no more than 2. But again, that's kind of debatable. I'm not a huge fan of having council there myself, but I'm just reading the table here, and this was kind of a middle ground that I could see, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in because I think we're going into a lot of different directions here. I don't think I've even looked at what the Recreation and Sport Community Grant adjudication process has funded in the past. I just don't have an idea of what it's done or hasn't done. The same is not true for the next one. And they are, to me, totally different animals. And that's why they're under different reports. One is actually a federally funded guns and gangs program. And the other one is, how do we distribute the money for recreation activities and sports activities, I guess, in the community? I really don't want to make that decision, and I hope that no one else wants to sit and make that decision, because if you do, you're going to deal with the same thing that staff are dealing with, except instead of being able to go to staff and say why, you're going to have to go find a mirror, and that's an uncomfortable conversation. I don't, and I rarely disagree with our CAO, who I think is doing an incredible job, by the way, in public. I don't think us asking them why is a breach of like the arm's lengthness. I think it's a necessary thing. We need to know why. I think that when there is a request to undo a thing, that's probably a breach of the arm's lengthness. And that shouldn't happen. And so as I look at this, we got 3 options. We either kick it back to members of staff, and you pick, Councillor Harvey's put 3 there already, and say that's the thing, that's the group. You accept that it's going to be members of council, and I won't show up to that committee meeting because I'm an ex officio on it. Or we go out and we get a citizen group to do it, but that not individuals that have a conflict inside of the requests that are being made. Because we don't want like deal making around a table, well, if you support my group, I'll support yours. So a mix of those things, I think, will get us in trouble. There's multiple hands. I'm going to go Councillor Kungle, Councillor Negussi, and
Quickly, I guess, to wrap it up, which is, thank you, Councillor Harvey, for putting something on the table. I heard you saying, don't really support members of council anyway, so I'm not apt to support any member of council on it, so I think I'll share that. I'll let that proceed because you put it on the floor. My interest is probably leaving it status quo. What's the rush? And putting an amendment on the floor that we scrap it and actually first go to exploring Guelph and bring that back as an alternative structure, and we can consider this grant and the composition more fully.
Councillor Negussi, then Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nadal. Just a friendly amendment. Can you add, instead of 2 councillors, can we put a community members in replacing the member of the council?
I would definitely take that as a friendly, because I'll be quite honest with you, I only had the 2 councillors in there to kind of go middle ground from where the staff report was to where I could see the conversation going, but definitely I would take that as a friendly.
CEO Proust, is there any input you have on 3 members of staff and a couple of members of the community?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. To members of committee, I mean, if I was picking, I would much rather staff be mixed with the public than the inherent sort of power dynamic with members of council and staff. So if that's the Sophie's choice, I'll take members of the community and staff.
I think you just chose 160,000 people ahead of the 11 in front of you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just to follow up on that, I guess, what would obviously putting it out for people to apply is no issue, but I guess one piece that I could see being a concern would be then those 2 members, depending on what application's coming in, being in conflict and obviously ensuring that they are declaring a conflict when they would have those issues arising, and to make sure that they are well versed in our conflict of interest, because I know when I've been on other boards and stuff, sometimes people really don't understand when they are and are not in conflict, and sometimes fly under the radar. And I just don't want to see that we run into issues down the road either, where they voted on something and it turns out they've got a tie to that one organization that has applied.
And I think that's every committee and every, we have a code of conduct that needs to manage that. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'm seeing a pattern tonight. When I talk less, I have better brainstorming ideas. So I think I'm gonna bring it home. You're trying not to laugh. For those watching at home, I think I'm gonna bring it home with all the feedback that everyone's been given. I think this is the final nail. Ms. Cook, from a legislative perspective, not from a should we, but are we able to put a call out for membership and that says that eligibility only applies to non-residents, to residents who are not residents of City of Barrie, Springwater, Innisfil, or Medonte, ideally, essentially soliciting, and maybe we don't get applications, but getting essentially impact from residents that I would call live outside the 40-kilometer radius. Are we able to do that from a legislative perspective? And I'll explain my idea why, depending on the answer.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales, that would be, we would probably want that included in any direction that is provided by council. And I might ask Dan to jump in because it's Rec and Cultures Committee, but there's nothing legislatively that says the person, like the committee members have to live in Barrie, but this is like, is this going to be like established as like a committee of council? Obviously, I'm not sure what the process will be, or is it going to be similar to the anti-racism task force that's administered separately and outside of the council process?
Okay.
So it would just, there's nothing legislatively that says a person has to live in Barrie.
Okay,
But
perfect.
we do have like our policy for our other committees, like our statutory committees and our non-statutory committees that really says that the people have to, like the members have to be residents of Barrie.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Cook. I'm hearing some flexibility. Mayor Nettle, here's where I'm going with this. Our investment board that manages our investments, a lot of that is merit-based. Some of it is, what do you bring to the table, which is still merit-based. Some of it is equity, et cetera. So I see the merit of this committee to achieve all the outcomes that all my colleagues have said. The merit is being not as minimally biased as possible. We're all biased, we're all human, but as minimally biased as possible. And what is one of the best ways to achieve that? Having someone that doesn't have a stake in the local stakeholders and the dynamics. Now, will that be all the time achieved? No. But if we get people from the York region, we get people from like North Simcoe, and I'm not limiting it to anybody. If we get applications there, they can make a very objective and specifically merit-based, and they have the qualifications to maybe interpret and make those decisions instead of being like, oh, I don't know why I'm making this decision, who's putting up their hand, who do I ask? Like, we're getting, just the way we got merit-based people with industry experience for our investment board. So, and that would remove any, or severely reduce any chances that we get biases. So I'm wondering if we can do exactly what everyone said, the two of you kind of put forward, and just say that we're soliciting from non-Barrie residents. And for the purpose of that, I include Innisfil, I include Ormondonte, I include Springwater, and I possibly include Essa Township as well, because lots of our Barrie residents, commute, they live 20 minutes out of town. Could that be an issue in soliciting applications? Possibly, but I do know that there's some cross-pollination, if you will, between people who live, say, in Vaughan and volunteer on a theater board in Mississauga.
Okay, Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just one point of clarity, actually, from a point that the clerk brought up, and through you to the CAO to see what his recommendation would be on this. Would you recommend that this be a committee of council, or that this just be something totally separated from council, so that way even the selection of those two civilian members would not come to this council?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, based on the discussion, Councillor Harvey, I don't believe it doesn't sound like you need to make it a committee of council. Mr. Bell's team could still continue to run the program, but instead of it all being staff members, the suggestion I think was to introduce two members from the community, which Mr. Bell's team could develop some criteria. I think he had sort of opined about perhaps a member of the Barrie Sports Hall of Fame or something like that. Invite some members in from the community to give a little more balance. It doesn't need to be a committee of council, which certainly adds a level of complexity to it. So based on what I've heard, I would say leave it housed where it is, which is in recreation and culture, and perhaps we can establish some criteria on those community invitees that we could bring in.
Great, thank you. That's exactly the answer I was hoping to hear.
May I very quickly, I just want to ask, what we've had a request, not a motion, okay, not an amendment. We've had a request to look at the way somewhere else does it, right? And a global fund, if you will, from all the funds that are out there. Could we, by any chance, Mr. Bell, get just like a quick half-pager this week describing what that is from what they're doing in Guelph, just so the rest, you have information the rest of us don't, and so if we or flip it around, then we can all be on the same page for next week, because maybe there is just some better model that's out there. Councillor Hamilton, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Through you, it's probably redundant at this point because what you've said is kind of where I'm going. I think we've complicated this quite a bit in my sense. Like, this should not come to council. It's very operational. I don't see a role for council in this. I completely understand where staff's coming from. It's a community-based program. I think there needs to be community input. I would have one staff member, 4 community members. Would love to hear about Guelph. I actually think the whole process of the grants needs to be relooked at, but in terms of the adjudication process, I don't know why we need to have it heavy with staff, and I certainly don't see a need or desire for council to be involved in a very operational activity. So my 2 cents for what it's worth, but I'm happy to receive information about Guelph, and I'm happy to hear, more public representatives, community representatives too. For me, I feel like having 3 staff and 2 community members is I don't know. I don't actually think that's doing it justice. I think this is a community-based program. It should be majority community and 1 staff member to oversee it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Horser.
Yeah, and just to quickly add that I don't think we need to go outside of Barrie. Barrie's a big city. I think we can find lots of people that are well qualified and do not have an actual conflict. I think that we don't need to reach outside. Like, think of any retired school principal, or there's lots of people that would be. Just a thought. It's late. Anyone. We don't need to go outside the city, I don't think.
Okay, so the motion I have on the floor that was a friendly amendment from Councillor Ngusi to Councillor Harvey is asking for 3 members of staff and 2 members from the public, and that request be conducted by the clerk's office to find those two individuals through Mr. Bell's, with Mr. Bell there, and report back to council through memo, I think is sufficient. I'm not sure I need another report back on this. I don't know if anyone else does, but I don't think I do. So that's what's on the floor, and I will call the vote on that. All those in favor? It carries. Those against? And so I think there'll be more information provided between this week and last week. We got to go on the main motion now as amended. Deputy Mayor Thompson?
This is more of a comment after the amendment and now the motion's amended. The only thing I would ask is that the members of public have no affiliation. If you belong to an organization or in any indirect way, you cannot be part of the selection panel. I know that we've had some issues with people that work for organizations then lobby for, so that would be my only stipulation.
Yeah, if we can just maybe in our memo back outline what that is, because if you have no affiliation with sports or recreation, it's going to be difficult to be right? You're saying with an organization that's actively seeking it. Yeah. So if we can just have that verbiage worked out on the way back in, I think that would be helpful.
I'm really sorry, but I think I got confused in what you put forward, what the vote was on. It was on the amendment as Councillor Harvey put forward? As
friendly amended by Councillor Ngusi for 2 members of the public and 3 members of staff.
Right, so I did not vote for that. So it's still carried, because I think you included me in that vote.
Still carried, yep.
Okay.
So on the main motion as amended, are there any other comments or questions?
Just one, could you clarify that? Because I believe that then includes members of council being added, or overall?
No
Okay.
members of council, 2 members of the public, 3 members of staff, and there'll be a memo back identifying which, and it's got to go through council next week.
I do have an amendment, but do you want me to wait till we motion on this to then add it in?
Sorry, could you?
So I guess it would be now?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to add paragraph 4, that staff examine the City of Guelph community grant process, which utilizes a citizen panel, and bring forward considerations for the structure of this committee.
So I think we're kind of putting 2 separate directions on the same motion, if that's, and I'm not sure I can rule that in order. So it wouldn't be a 4, it would be completely amending it to that staff go and figure out how to emulate what's happening in Guelph.
If I can clarify, if it helps.
Yep.
So the amendment, if it puts 2025 on it, because I know you want the 2024 process, but I'd still like staff to then bring back if we support this modified structure, I still think there's merit in exploring what others are doing and how to grow more of a contingent of residents in that panel and differentiate maybe the roles of staff in decision-making and the framework and criteria versus a panel that might be larger that has more resident engagement. So I don't see it as replacing, but a process.
So if you're saying that, that as an interim process, so an amendment to paragraph 1 would be that as an interim process, what's been amended and adopted. Paragraph 4, that in the longer view, staff report back on.
The evolution of the current structure and process
Then I could,
after looking at Guelph as an example.
I can accept that.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments with regards to the request for staff to investigate what Guelph does or other models that are out there? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, it carries. On the main motion, now twice amended, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, it carries. And we will move to the final held by Councillor Corser. Councillor Corser.
I'd like to put the motion on the floor as amended. As printed, amended. It's got a conversation going on here. I think a lot of the conversation actually, as covered in what we were just discussing with the Recreation and Sport Community Grant adjudication process, and I might be confusing this. Somebody please help me. Was this report was to change the panel? Yes, it was amended to include 5 members of the Community Safety Committee. So basically, it was the same as a previous, that we're putting the full complement of the Adjudication Committee being the Community Safety Committee. That was full council, right? Councillors that was going to be on this Adjudication Committee. And I have the kind of like the, I have, I'm uncomfortable with this because of the exact same reason. It just doesn't feel that this being, like you said, for more of a specialized portion of our community, I thought that it would be best that it would have a makeup of an adjudication committee that would be more experienced or more involved in that. Could make better decisions than maybe some of us being laymen would. So I just wanted to maybe change the amend. What is to leave as the makeup as it is now, or to reach out to the public with maybe experts in the field to replace some of our staff members if it's overweighted with staff, like the last conversation. But I think it would be more of a finicky pick for who would be sitting on it. I just wanted to open this up as conversation because I'd like to see this not be left just to elected officials to make those decisions.
Deputy Mayor Thompson, then Councillor Reba.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So this one to me is a lot different. This is federal grant money with a purpose of gangs and guns, community safety stuff, which we all are responsible for. We get hounded by it. We get emails about it. And I think this is where council can control the best bang for the buck. When we get grant funding for a purpose, I can support this one wholeheartedly with the composite changing with community safety well-being members. And if somebody wanted to move, you know, some community partners of similar to the community and safety well-being plan, I would accept that too. But I think this has a purpose where the money should be directed. And I can support council having, as we own this. So that's my thoughts.
Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments are going to be exactly the same as the previous one, so I just say ditto. I don't, again, yes, it has a purpose, but at the same time, and of course, as counselors, we wear it, but we've set it up. It's a program that is being run by the city, and I think we should just leave it alone and let staff make those kind of calls. I don't think we should be doing that operational kind of work.
So I'll be really, really honest right here. I had a big problem with where a couple of the funding items went last time because I know about this funding model from time of being a member of Parliament and the focus on guns and gangs and how to influence young people who are in very at-risk situations to choose the best path going forward. Like, when I get a call, or let's say it's not me and I'm not around, or Deputy Mayor Robert Thompson gets a call from the Minister of Public Safety asking about the funding we chose to give out, which we didn't choose to give out, and could we please substantiate how we decided to do so, I can tell you that my conversation with my Chief Administrative Officer, our Chief Administrative Officer, and with Deputy Mayor Thompson was, I can't. I found it very difficult. I asked for, and after I think everybody received it, I asked for some context behind the decision-making process. And I think that one of the most difficult pieces of this was actually that the city of Barrie is actually best positioned. Like, so one of the times that we are thinking that young people are going to be in difficult situations, like let's think about the summertime, right? Those with means, most of their kids are going into camps, right? I always tell people that the local park is the summer camp for the kids in government housing, because it is. And I think that we had some missed opportunities to be able to provide free camps, free access to at-risk children and youth in our community. With this funding, I feel that we were actually as a city best positioned, but we had a little bit of a conflict of interest inside of our own team that made the decisions on where the money should go and how it should be spent. If you can think about, I don't know what the ratio is. I'm going to pretend it's, my kids go into the City of Barrie summer camps, and I'm guessing it's 5 or 6 or 7 to 1 per counselor. Mr. Bell, you might know, you might not. Somewhere in there. And each one of those students costs us, I don't know, $4,000 a summer because of the amount that's subsidized by the student program. And so for $20,000, you end up with 20 to 30 kids every week for a summer having an incredible program, because Mr. Bell, you run incredible programming with your team through our rec services program. The value I think we missed on this last run. I think that we undervalued how impactful our recreation teams are, specifically during the summer, March break, those times where we don't want our young people just sitting around doing nothing with no supervision and unable to be accessing the services that we want them to have. So I was critical, and that critique stands. I have no problem defending it. I'm not sure, and again, that throwing it at council members is the right decision, but I was really critical. So I'd probably be more comfortable. I think it's more objective for us because these dollars, I believe the city does run these programs, and in competition with others that run the programs. Perhaps it would be easier for staff if it wasn't staff, because they could then apply for that funding without being the same people that are hitting the approve button at the same time, to be able to deliver those services. And this is big money. How much was the last amount that went out?
Approximately $700,000 there now.
$700,000 on the last go round, and there's another $550 or some odd
I understand there's one more intake for probably somewhere in the order of $600,000, right? 400.
$400,000. So that's the grapple on this one for me. On the previous one, I didn't feel this way. On this one, I feel like we've got to come up with something different because I believe that our team, because of the value we add, are best suited. But I also wouldn't be able to defend a call from the minister saying, why'd you guys give yourselves all the money, and who were the adjudicators that are different from the people who were asking for it? So I think there's inherently an issue that we need to figure out. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, and through you, I appreciate your input and insight, and I agree with a lot of what you said. I feel differently in some respects that I still feel like it's a community fund, no matter where the funding has come from, and it needs to have community input or involvement. And I hear the conflict with staff being involved in it. So again, my thought process on this would be then you have one or two councillors and the majority of community members. But I think more alarming for me is what you pointed out. It's not who's deciding, but it's the process in which that decisions are getting made. And if the minister's calling you and we're unable to say, we're not really sure, I mean, that's not an issue with people, it's an issue with process. For me, there needs to be a
Sorry,
very...
the minister didn't actually call me.
Well, no, I'm saying if the minister ever called you, it doesn't matter if they're calling you or me or staff or whoever. We should have a very clear process identified. We should have a very clear decision-making framework that is utilized, whether it's staff on the panel, whether it's us on the panel, whether it's community members on the panel. There needs to be a very consistent approach. So again, I don't know how it's been done. I don't know what decision-making framework or tool has been used in the past, but to me, it looks like we might actually need to look at the process of how we evaluate proposals coming in to ensure that we've got the answers and we've got a really clear, consistent, transparent approach in how we evaluate proposals going forward. But my comfort level would be have one or two councillors and 3 or 4 public members on it.
So I'm just going to leave this open for debate right now rather than motions or counter motions. So I saw Councillor Morales. I think I saw Councillor Riepma and Councillor Kunkel. So I'm going to go with Councillor Morales, then go around the table.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I see your point. If this was the federal money that they got for themselves, like from their own budget, it would be that parliamentary committee chair and its standing members that would be accountable for how that money was spent. And sometimes, you know, standing committees in Parliament are quiet, which is a polite word to say it. And when things don't go well or money gets spent, there's lots of questions and there's lots of panels and there's lots of sweaty answers. So I think why did I say that analogy is if there are questions on how the money got implemented, given to the community, and spent, the feds, when they're theoretically calling you, are going to be going to what they understand is the standing committee, and in that case for us, that's the Community Safety Committee, the chair, its vice chair, and its membership. So I kind of understand why the similarities with these examples. So I'm actually I'm supportive of your approach to it and how it's typed. Here's another reason that makes me more comfortable, because I do see Councillor Hamilton's point. It doesn't mean that the other one isn't aligned with our strategic plan, but this one is very explicitly aligned with our strategic plan, a safer Barrie, and a lot of the initiatives, the community well-being plan, you name it. I could point to any document, and it would have to do with safety. So this one, the fact that it's much more materially aligned with the council's strategic plan, I think it being the members of the Community Safety Committee, for me, justifies it a little bit more. Whereas the other one, again, doesn't mean rec isn't important, because we also have a healthy city, et cetera, but recreation and sports community, it seems a little bit more micro. And I've had issues in the past before understanding micro and macro, but for this one, it can be a little bit more justified.
Just to confirm, because we did appoint a different committee tonight that has similar verbiage. You're saying the staff recommendation is what you agree with?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Just because of I thought I heard the other committee name, and Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. And I hear what you say, that we missed out last time, we didn't do it right. And we didn't have the right criteria in place, I suppose, and the wrong people got the wrong dollars. And I think the problem is not who is making the decision, but the criteria that they use to make the decision. And so I think if it's members of the Community Safety Committee, I don't have a problem with that. But the problem the committee is going to have is when there's a flood of applications sitting in front of the committee, how do you choose? Because, first of all, we have to set a set of criteria. And then I think whatever committee we strike can manage how they choose who to give the money to. So it seems to me more important that we decide what the criteria are going to be, and then whether it's staff or council, or community members, I'm not sure it matters. But I think it's really important to set the criteria, because otherwise, whatever committee you have is going to have the same problem that they had last time.
I'll just fill in some of the conversations that were had between the CAO and myself. One of the lines he stole from one of our provincial ministers was, "It's never been so hard to give out money." And the criteria are negotiated between us and the federal government. We align underneath the program. The issue that I see is we never applied for our program we're managing because we're managing the program. And if someone has any idea in the community of a better organization to manage this than us, in terms of managing dollars being spent versus the actual program itself, I'd be hard pressed to find it. So we do have to adhere to that federal policy on what the criteria are. They have been morphing and changing. So we don't really get to necessarily set it. But I think there was 16 applications or something like that, 17 applications. And there were 9 or 10 victors, 11 victors on the 700K. And, the business case that I very roughly outlined from our own department here blew any of those out of the water when I looked at it. But I'm totally open to it being a citizen panel. And I don't think that Mr. Bell should ask Miss McAlpine to give money to Mr. Bell from the federal government for our program that we're, you know what I mean? Like there is an inherent conflict no matter how we deal with it if we're in charge of it.
And maybe that conflict doesn't go away if it's members of council.
I don't necessarily disagree. I have a conflict already because I'm saying what I think that should happen with it. Mr. Prowse.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I just wanted to remind members of committee, the program's over, so there's only one more intake. So I know we've asked for additional direction on this based on some feedback we received. But there is no indication the federal government's going to renew or continue this program. So I imagine once we've distributed the approximately $400,000 left over, the program will wrap up. So perhaps that helps inform who should be on the committee.
Just a quick comment, and I hear the considerations. I'm all for more of a citizen-led on this, but I do really appreciate that, in the memo we're talking about the amount of money, the remaining portion of the allocations utilized by city-led initiatives. And that's not because we competed, but also as we could utilize it and it was appropriate. And there's really great work being done through our public service. So I think it's important for us to have some protection from that. If we keep the structure as is, or if we move it to council, then I would at least say, you've got a new committee you just struck. It might not be within their decision-making, but maybe consultation, because I can't help but assume if that committee, I believe the mandate is to review the community safety and well-being plan, make recommendations, set direction. Ideally, the timing is aligned to saying, do some of the initiatives coming forward more than others align to the things we want to see changes on. So maybe they're not the panel, but they're consulted.
Okay, so I think that's so it's another idea thrown at us. We've got an adjudication from staff, an adjudication through the Community Safety Committee, and a request for input and consultation with the Community Safety and Wellbeing. I've got the page afterwards. I'd be fine with that if everyone else is fine with that. It brings in, the folks we talked about earlier on, the Simcoe Muskoka Family Connections, Child, Youth, and Family Services, the Police Department, the Simcoe County District School Board, the County of Simcoe, the Health Team. I'm on both, and Councillor Kungle, and then Safe Barrie. Yep.
And if I may add further context, I think it could add some protectionistic approach, but it's also not necessary for them to have decision-making. But you could also look at a blind type of level, which is not the who applied, but what's the change mechanism that's being proposed for funding, and then you can help to remove some bias. So if it's city-funded program or an external program, what you're really focusing on is not the who, but what's the purpose of how the dollars are going to be spent and the confidence in the utilization of it.
Yeah, I love that. So really what you're saying is managed by staff, screened before it gets to any of the committee, so that it is not there's no possibility of politics getting into it, because it's literally just focused on the end result. Madam Clerk, hardest job of the evening.
Okay, so as an amendment, Mayor Nuttall, I would suggest that the composition of the adjudication panel, I guess we're going back to the staff, so they're identified in paragraph 13, which is the general manager, director of, yes, sorry. Sorry.
I think it was, I think it was just consulted through
Sorry.
No.
My apologies.
There's 9 million conversations, it's not your fault.
Okay, so then I would just, and that I would just add a paragraph that prior to any funds being awarded, that the Community Safety Committee consult with the Community Safety Wellbeing Committee on their selections.
Do you want me to repeat that? You're good? Okay. Councillor Corser?
Just for clarification, so the process would go, somebody would apply, then it would go through staff in consultation with the Community and Safety Wellbeing Plan, and then it'll come forward to Community Safety Committee here to be voted on as a blind kind of thing that we don't know the association we're voting on. We're just voting on the concept? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. I think I might need a little clarification on what the motion is.
Okay, my apologies, it's late. I'm not probably being very clear. So what would be is the paragraph, what is being proposed, and jump in if I'm incorrect, is that the composition of the adjudication panel, so anybody that applies, their applications would go to the Community Safety Committee for consideration. Prior to any final decisions being made, so the Community Safety Committee would review the applications, make their selections, and then provide them to the Community Safety Wellbeing Committee for any input and consultation before the funds are awarded to whatever organizations are selected.
I'm not sure if I am comfortable with, I'm not sure if I would vote yes to that, because I think that maybe to the end process, but we still would be lobbied, and we still would have the impact of making the gatekeepers of what would go forward as the Community Safety Committee, which would be council members. So I'm not sure if that was the
So
spirit
who-
of the motion that was being put forward, or I'm just misunderstanding it.
Yeah, I think the framework needs to be figured out, but if you're doing a blind process, an individual lobbies results in not being part of the process, because otherwise it's undermined said process, right? So I'm less concerned about lobbying, because then you just say, oh, no, these people are trying to get around what council's already deemed to happen and left themselves on the outside. But if you have an issue with the process, I think what the clerk has said is, staff basically manage going out to market requesting proposals and submissions. That comes in, the Community Safety Committee will look at and evaluate without names, just seeing results. You know, we send it over, probably with our input up front, to this other, the Wellbeing Plan Committee for feedback. And then it comes back, and if there's friction and they don't align, then that's at least a conversation that the Community Safety Committee can go, okay, we either didn't think of that, or we did, and here's why that doesn't make sense. But throughout the whole thing, it's held, there's accountability to it.
Perfect. And of course, staff would be, the applications that come through staff, and that would be, they would, of course, make sure the criteria is met for each application. Yeah, okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, awesome. Yep. Councillor.
Sorry, I know it's late. The blind process you're saying, so we wouldn't actually know who it was that was applying, correct? But don't you think throughout the proposal, like proposals that I receive, it's written throughout the proposal, right? You'd have to go through in any indication that would, I mean, I think that's impossible, truthfully. I think that's, great optimistic thinking, but I think it'd be very, very hard to go through a proposal and create anonymity to it. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's just, I don't know how you would do that.
You know, I can honestly tell you that when I look through that list from previous, and maybe reread it between now and next week, I'm not sure that you'd be able to tell who it is from the previous one. Like, in fact, I say that because I remember being surprised about who was putting it forward. Like, how does that fit? Now, I guess in the city of Barrie camps, maybe it does.
I don't want to complicate things.
Yeah.
I think we've complicated them enough. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't think that would be feasible and realistic for every single proposal, truthfully.
Yeah. I just want to remind everyone, this is a staff-initiated, hey, we don't like the critiques, so please find a process that fits for what council appreciates. And that's what it is. And I can understand why staff doesn't want to be in a position where they're awarding money and they're getting critiqued by us. It's never going to be perfect. Let's land as close as we can. Deputy Mayor.
I don't think the ocean's just boiled yet. Just a little bit. I think, no motion to extend. Just reading this, it's one more year. Simplify it. Let's remove council and just go with the community safety and well-being plan for the final year. And if we're fortunate enough to receive federal grant funding based on this, then we look at the composition of the select committee from that point moving forward.
Is that an amendment to your own amendment, or is that a friendly?
I didn't move an amendment.
I think you
so
did.
I amended the amendment. I said if anybody had an amendment. But I'm amending that one.
So you're amending the motion you put on the floor. Okay, so the amendment's on the floor for just the community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Committee to provide the recommendations back to or decision-making back to staff. Councilor Corser.
Just to drag this out so much further, I just wanted to take the temperature as staff, and I know that they brought this forward with the support of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Oversight. I'm hoping that that will add some comfort to staff going through the process. That's all. And I was wondering if maybe staff had some thing that they might want to enlighten us or inform us that we might not be, we might be missing something here. Is there any feedback from Mr. Prowse?
I'll start off, and Mr. Bell can certainly add in, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. I would just like to clarify, staff are not responding to a critique specifically or criticism. You know, this is the job that we do. I think what we've learned through this process is between the criteria developed by the federal government, who really hold the purse strings, and the genuine attempt to try to deliver services broadly across our community, the elected officials are actually probably better positioned to understand those needs. You know, outside of this program itself, I can tell you over the last probably year, I've had more community groups or needs identified, mostly by the mayor and his office, to be honest with you. And for whatever reason, those groups would not get to me and they would not get to staff. But because of elected officials' connection with the community, they both understand the need and have the connection. And I think that was a piece that we identified actually was missing. So if we rewound the clock and did this from day one, I have to be honest, staff's recommendation would be similar. It's not a response to anything except that we think we can do better, but we think that we all play a role. Staff are very good at evaluations. They're very good at building criteria. They're very good on the technical side. We're not as connected to the community in the same way as elected officials are. And we think that that is a layer that perhaps could be added to this process to improve it quite genuinely. In this case, it happens to be at the end of a 2-year grant period, the last tranche of money, which is not expected to be renewed. So I would just tell you honestly that it is not a response to criticism or anything like that. It is, I believe, staff's genuine belief that together we can actually do better. And it's not always perfect, but that is, you know, that is, I believe, staff's position. But certainly if Mr. Bell has something to add, I'd welcome it.
I think, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser's question, that there is also an element of the funding that, in fact, we have used for internal city programs, but haven't published it as well. So, in an example, you mentioned summer camps. While we weren't overtly offering free camps as an example, we did increase the funding through the grant for those members of the Rec Access program so they could use additional funding to support their children in camps should they wish to. And at the end of the summer, we'll evaluate that program to see how well the uptake was. But yeah, other than that, I think CAO Prowse has said everything that needs to be said.
In light of staff's input, I hate to drag this out further and hit the rewind button, but I think that with this new information, I'd like to revisit, if it's possible in process, or if we're allowed to revisit the motion where it would go through the Community Safety Committee as a kind of a filter with after some staff input.
You would like to revisit going back to that, not the Community Safety and Wellbeing?
With the blind motion that was put forward. I will put that out to whoever wants to take it.
Before I put the friendly out, can we just identify what's currently been amendment, what's currently on the floor?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, it was to basically change the words of Community Safety Committee to Safety Wellbeing is what's on the floor right now. But I thought you...
Yeah. So I'm not sure how this complicates it. Maybe it's not friendly. But I think when we were talking a bit about the three pieces, keep the community safety and well-being as kind of the sandwiched piece, because then you're not changing their mandate. You're not getting them into the muck of becoming more of a funding evaluator. They're just being consulted with a blind to say, 10 applications came in, this amount of money, this is a target audience, this is a change mechanism. How does it align to the direction you're recommending about where we need to go and focus on a refresh of the community safety and well-being plan? And then it still kicks up to the council committee for final decision, with that being a bit protectionistic to say, we've had filters going through this with discretion. So if it leans towards staff programming, that's what it is. If it doesn't, that's what it is. But overall, there should be alignment through that group to say, whatever is funded should be facilitating the direction we want to go in for the community safety and well-being plan. So I don't know if that's where we're at.
So just to confirm, because I think all 10 of us have been on every side of this. Are we recommending then the Community Safety Committee? Are you recommending the Community Safety Committee be the final adjudicator?
Which is the standing staff committee, not the community well-being committee that we just struck? Just to clarify, because I know we're talking about two very similarly worded
It's not a staff
committees.
committee, it's a committee of council.
Right, then I am,
Right.
yes.
Yes. And that they get feedback from the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee.
Yeah.
And that staff handle the outputs and inputs in terms of requests for proposals.
Yes.
Okay, that's where we were a few minutes ago. We're back there. This is,
Does anybody want to take my turn?
okay. Any other questions or comments? None. So that's what's on the floor as an amendment. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? It carries. On the main motion, all those in favor? It carries. You didn't even get an option to speak again, so that's the way it goes. We're going to move past the reports, items for discussion, information items, inquiries. Are there any inquiries from members of General Committee this evening? Seeing none, on to announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Councillor Kungl.
I'll be quick, but just for those that were not watching the Affordability Committee meeting, that was a public presentation on a Ward 3 property, the Sperling area, that's surplus land. So that would have been a zoning conversation, so it'll come back to General Committee, but that did identify a direction for 30 stories. So for those watching that development, please make sure you make reference to Ward 3 developments on the City of Barrie website. Communities in Bloom has a meeting on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Act Transportation Sustainability next Thursday, 5:30 p.m. And then just two other comments. One, thank you to Mr. Friery. I had a porta potty on the move. It was interesting where that thing landed and repeat issues, but Dave Friery and his team have been on that, and I appreciate that. But also Callaway Court, for residents that were in the habit of not visiting that space, that footbridge has been completed. Thank you to staff for that. And there's been a service request just for a bit of a tidy up in that area, but that is open and accessible. So again, thank you to staff for completing that. I know you fast-tracked it a bit to be done this spring.
Thank you, Councillor. I once had a porta potty put on my front lawn, and it turned me into 2.5 washroom house. Any other announcements? Councillor Corser.
So I just wanted to thank everybody. I had my Ward 4 spring celebration at Sunnydale Park last weekend, and although Saturday rained out, which kind of throws a damper on things, but we revived it on Sunday, and it was a fantastic event. Thank all the amazing people who made this year's Ward 4 Spring Celebration awesome. And thank you for pivoting all your plans due to the rainy weather on Saturday and make it happen on Sunday. And I would like to thank Redwood Park Communities, Nature Barrie, the City of Barrie Transit. There was Jason Zimmerman and Mike McConnell, I believe it is, of transit staff, who were absolutely fantastic. And from their waste management. We had Chris O'Neill and Matthew Shannon, and I'd just like to say that they were there, but really the stars of the waste management was the red wiggler worms, which were a huge favorite with the kids for the composting. It was a lot of fun. Big fan of worms, it was good. And there was Firebird Community Cycle came out, first Barrie Foresters Scout Troop, and of course they did their, yes, child-friendly axe throwing, which was fun. I thought that I forgot a first aid kit because I needed one for site, and I raced over, and of course I asked the scouts, and they said we have 3. So we're good. But we didn't need it, thankfully. And the incredible talented folk musicians that we had there last year, we had a group this year again. And the Barrie Pipe and Drum Highland dancers were fantastic. They were practicing for a competition, so they put on quite a show for us. And I'd like to thank also the phenomenal Cassandra Rutherford for helping me organize, well, actually, she organized it, I nodded, for making the Magic happen again this year. And it was a fantastic event. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Any other announcements around the table? Seeing none. The City of Barrie's pavement marking contractor will start the annual painting of road lane markings across Barrie beginning the week of May 27th and will run until October. For more information, visit barrie.ca/road maintenance. The month of June is known as National Indigenous History Month and People's Day. There will be a flag raising ceremony at City Hall the 3rd of June at 11 a.m. For more information, visit barrie.ca/National Indigenous History Month. The City of Barrie invites residents to provide their feedback on the master plans for transportation, water, and wastewater as the city continues to grow. For information, please visit buildingbarrie.ca. The City of Barrie Council meeting scheduled for June 5th has been rescheduled to the 4th of June, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. So that will be Tuesday next week instead of Wednesday. Circulation list, May 15th. Are there any items for May the 15th? Seeing none, May the 22nd. Are there any items from May the 22nd? Seeing none, May the 29th. Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nadal. I have a question for item A11, 240529. Question to Mr. Prowse. In second, it's about the chronic homelessness issue. On page 2nd, it talks about the individual released from Central North Correctional Center. And is there any update regarding the family reunification program? I know we had some individuals who were not happy with this program, but for the record, since we start this program, how many individuals have been reconnected with their family, loved one? Is there any update with that?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Negussi. Councillor Negussi, I actually apologize. You and I had a conversation about this, and I thought actually the data you wanted me to pull was the prisoner drop-off data. So if you'll accept my apology, I'll get you the data because we didn't do it directly. The Family Reunification Fund was done through the John Howard Society, and I'm gapping on the Elizabeth Fry Society. And as part of our funding agreement with them, they did provide us some specific details. So I apologize. I'll circulate that to council electronically. I don't have it in front of me. But if you'd like to talk about the North Correction shuttle drop-off, I'd be happy to tell you about how many reformed prisoners we have diverted and have not arrived in Barrie because of the program and the funding that council instituted a year ago. Would you like me to talk about that? Thank you, Councillor Negussi. I appreciate that opportunity, and as council is as well aware, as part of the broad tranche of funding you approved last year to address chronic homelessness in the city of Barrie, one of the pilots that we started and then and have carried forward was taking over the drop-off released prisoners from the correctional facility in Penetanguishene. And for the last not quite a year, starting in September of last year, originally we ran the new shuttle program through a contractor, as council is well aware, and then mid-program actually switched it in-house, and we were able to reduce the cost by about 40%. So not only have we achieved council's intention of making sure that those individuals have the best chance of getting back to their home communities and are not simply dropped off in the city of Barrie, as in fact was the protocol previous to that. So I can tell you, since September of last year, 252 individuals that would have arrived in the city of Barrie actually arrived at other destinations closer to their home communities. And that would not have happened if it was not for the investment that this council has put in to the shuttle program, which is continuing to run. So we do look forward to providing additional details to council on the benefits of that program. But that is a significant number of released prisoners, 252 individuals, which, if not for council's action, would have arrived in the city of Barrie looking for opportunity, and instead they have arrived much closer to home with a better chance for success, and certainly puts us on a path to success as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you. If I, May 29th, C4 240529, memorandum from the Barrie Public Library Chief Executive Officer dated May 10th concerning the library's KPIs be referred to an October 2024 Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting.
Okay, it's a referral motion. All those in favor? Carries. Any other items on the circ list? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
May 29th, A10 240529, confidential memorandum from the Executive of Development Services regarding deposition of land, water lot to be referred to Finance and Responsible Governance Committee for consideration.
Referral motion with regards to the item. All those in favor? It carries. Any other items on the circ list?
I'm done.
Are you sure? Are you leaving? I don't see any other items on the circ list, so we're going to move to adjournment. Thanks, everybody.
That was the update from City Hall. Thank you for watching.